Podcast'a hoş geldiniz. Ben Mersin Üniversitesi Dilbilim Topluluğu eş başkanı Sıla. Ve bugün bizimle beraber çok değerli bir konuğumuz var. Sayın Profesör Doktor Sumru Özsoy, Degrees of Animacy and Passive in Turkish adlı çalışmasıyla bizlerle beraber olacak bugün. Sumru hocamız aynı zamanda kendisini ve çalışmalarını çok severek takip ettiğimiz bir hocamız olduğu için davetimizi kırmayıp gelmesi bizler için çok değerli. Tekrardan teşekkür ediyoruz hocam. İsterseniz size sözü bırakalım, başlayalım sunuma.
Olur, peki. Önce özürle başlayayım ben. Çünkü açıkçası yarım saatinizi aldım. Ama bu teknik konudan dolayı oldu bu.
Evet.
Özür dilerim. Evet, böyle bir şey.
Estağfurullah hocam. Biz teşekkür ediyoruz sabrınız için.
Rica ederim. Okay, I mean, I asked several times whether the talk should be in Turkish or in English, and the last time was about 6 or 7 hours ago, because I was ready for both languages. And again, the question was whether whether there are any listeners who would prefer to listen to it in English. Or can I do it in Turkish? And then the answer came back saying that not everyone is just, more or less only a Turkish speaker, but, everyone would be able to follow both languages, which kind of meant that maybe if I, organize it in such a way that the presentation is in English, then everyone will be able to follow it as well. Okay, yes. The talk is going to be on degrees of animacy and the kind of evidence coming for the degrees of animacy coming from the relation of the various operations in Turkish and passive, particularly the argument structure and passivization in Turkish. Okay, as we all know, just as a very quick review for everyone, argument structure, okay, with respect to the verb, nature of verbs cross-linguistically, okay, there are 3 categories of verbs. Classically kind of referred to as intransitive, transitive, and ditransitive, but in terms of more modern linguistic analysis, being referred to as 1-place, 2-place, and 3-place predicates, referring to the number of arguments that the verb itself takes. And the intransitive ones taking only one argument, transitives 2 arguments, and ditransitives 3 arguments. Now, structurally, I will not be talking that much about the structural implications of these within the generative framework, because I will be focusing more on the nature of the arguments and the relation of each of these constructions or each of these predications with respect to the passive operation in Turkish, and how kind of, semantic syntax interfaces are in fact very closely related to each other. Okay, just, very quickly again, going back to all the way back to 1978, by the way, we can go on with the next slides. You can follow it up. I see only argument structure. The next one as well, please. Okay, 1-place predicates. Going back to 1978 to Perlmutter's initial analysis, and then showing the how the argument structure, the nature of the argument structure and syntax are intricately related to each other. Bourdieu's, of course, generalization, unaccusative generalization in 1984. What came out of this research was that the intransitive class is not a very innocent class. That, you know, that one place predicate is in fact based on the nature of the semantic relation of that single argument to the verb, and as such that there are two classes of one place predicates. One, the unergative class, which where the subject of the syntactic subject is also the underlying subject of the construction. In çocuklar, like çocuklar hızlı koşuyor, where the semantic relation of the subject NP is the agent. The children have the agentive potential to run, to will to run, and to run. And then the second class of intransitives, the unaccusatives, where the subject, the surface subject, is in fact not the agent, but it is the theme of the predicate. And that these two classes are in fact, you know, syntactically, they are a single one-place predicates. However, the semantic relationship of the element that occurs as the syntactic subject, the two differ from each other. And further research, particularly with respect to the implications of these, Nakipoğlu, Demiralp in 2003, she very convincingly argued that the distinction between the two subclasses of one-place predicates is in fact not a very binary distinction, but it is more continuous, so that we have a continuum between the unaccusative and the unergative predications. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide. Animacy of arguments in unergatives and unaccusatives. Okay, given that there are two classes of one-place predicates, a number of quite an extensive amount of research was conducted on the nature of the relationship of that single argument to the predicate. And as we said a little while ago, the unergatives, the typical unergative, where the two differ from each other, the unergatives and the unaccusatives, is in the syntactic or the semantic relation of that single argument to the verb. So with the unergatives, the subject is interpreted to be the agent, to have the potential to carry out and the will to carry out the action of the event that is indicated by the predicate, in contrast to unaccusatives, where the subject, the syntactic subject, is in fact the underlying object, where it is the one that is affected by the verb and does not necessarily have the inherent property of being the agent. And so the research, one of the leading researchers in the area, Levin and Rapoport-Hovaf, all the way back in 95, they in fact noted that some unergative verbs are, particularly those with inanimate subjects, have theme or are theme unergative verbs rather than agent unergative verbs. Now, of course, that seems to be like what we are dealing with is, in fact, then why aren't they unaccusatives? Well, because their syntactic properties differ significantly from the canonical unaccusative predicates. Foley and Harley, on the other hand, rather than saying that these are theme anergatives, they have suggested that there is, in fact, teleological capability, the notion of teleological capability, where the source of animacy effects, in grammar is the inherent qualities and abilities of the entity to participate in the eventuality, the reality, the realization, denoted by the predicate. So that they are not, in fact, just purely theme which are affected, but that there is the inherent quality that makes it possible for them to actually be the subjects of the anergative predicates. So that the notion of animacy and that they are different types of defining animacy has been a very crucial significance in the literature. Okay, so if we kind of go to the next slide by Nakiboğlu Demiral, her argumentation was, in fact, she has, again, very significantly shown that there is a very close link between the tense and aspect marker on the verb and the referential properties of the implicit subject phrase in an impersonal passive construction with these predicates. So in those cases in which the verb is marked with the aorist marker, the implicit subject of the impersonal passive construction receives an indefinite interpretation. The implicit subject of the impersonal passive construction, on the other hand, receives a referential reading when the verb is marked with the past tense marker, so that the tense aspect marker on the verb has an effect on the interpretation of the subject in an impersonal passive construction. So if we go on to the next slide, here I basically, state what the paper has claimed or will claim with respect to the animacy effect in the one-place predicates and its relation to passivization. Okay, for one thing, the basic claim of this paper has been that basically Turkish distinguishes between three types of animacy. Inherent animacy, which is kind of, the basic animacy. Teleological animacy, as suggested or assumed by Foley and Harley, based on Higginbotham's analysis. And then that there is, in fact, a third type of animacy, which I have referred to as inherited animacy. And that the difference between these three types of animacy is grammaticalized in Turkish, and that Turkish also distinguishes between the two categories of psychological predicates structurally. That there is that psychological predicates, which in fact needs even further analysis, but as part of this presentation, because it's very closely related to animacy, that I suggest that there are two classes of psychological predicates. All right, so let's kind of, if we go on to the next slide, I won't spend too much time on this because this is kind of common knowledge by now. I'm sure, the personal passives kind of based on the basic two-place predicate type of construction in the kind of, very basic classical sense, except, of course, the classical sense of, personal passive, which licenses an agentive phrase, of course, the agent cannot be assumed to be base generated in the subject position, because the basic question then is if it is the case that the object or the theme object is the one that surfaces in the subject position of a personal passive, then how can it be in the subject position of a passive construction if the agent is already sitting in that position? So that, excuse me, there must be some way in which that position is in fact an empty position, so that the theme object can move to the subject position of the passive, the surface subject position of the passive construction. And within the generative framework, there have in fact been several different accounts of how it is that the subject position of a passive construct, of a personal passive construction, is in fact empty, so that the theme can move into that position. And the very first analysis of this phenomenon actually was proposed by Yeagley in 1985. That's a misprint, by the way, 1985, where he assumed that the passive marker absorbs the case marking potential of the verb, so that the verb cannot assign case to its internal argument. And also the by phrase or the tarafından phrase absorbs the agent phrase property, so that the agent phrase occurs as the complement of the by or the tarafından phrase, which basically means that the subject position is empty because the by phrase has in fact attracted the agent phrase. And since the verb cannot assign case to its internal argument, then the internal argument has to move to a position where it receives case, so that case filter is satisfied, and it moves to the subject position where it gets its nominative case. So that the agent in a personal passive construction is, in fact, it can optionally occur in an adjunct phrase as the argument of an adjunct phrase. And so that's kind of, the classical passive construction. Now, when we get to the, the next slide. As we all know, Turkish also licenses, which is crucial, of course, with respect to our analysis, impersonal passives, impersonal passive constructions, where, we have a sentence like, çocuklar bütün gece dans ettiler, where the subject is the agent, and this is basically an unergative impersonal passive construction, where the agent the implicit agent is interpreted to be, or the implicit argument in an impersonal passive construction is interpreted to be the agent. But what is crucial in Turkish is that in an impersonal passive construction, the agent phrase cannot occur in overt syntax. However, given that the predicate is in fact an agentive predicate, the implicit subject, which never surfaces even as an adjunct in the construction, is interpreted to be an agent. Now, the next one. What is also crucial is that Turkish also licenses unaccusatives in impersonal passive constructions. Okay, as has been noted by Özkaragöz in 1981. Okay, insan bu gölde boğulur, bu gölde boğulunur. Now, in line with the unergatives, okay, the impersonal passive construction constructed with an unaccusative predicate does not license, and kind of, by definition, an agent phrase. By definition, of course, unaccusatives do not have patience. So that unergatives and unaccusatives do license, both of them do license impersonal passive constructions in Turkish, and both predictably, particularly with unaccusatives, neither one licenses an agentive phrase in the overt structure. Okay, so the next slide, please. Now, ergative intransitive verbs, on the other hand, do not undergo passivization. Okay, now what does this mean? We basically have buzlar eridi. Buzlar erindi is not possible. Okay, oturum 5 saat sürdü. Oturum 5 saat sürüldü is not possible. So that there are constraints with respect to the impersonal passive constructions, and as such. Now, what is also crucial or significant, the next one, verbal polysemy, yeah. Now, Turkish, in fact, uses this potential for passivization to distinguish between polysemous verbs. All right, as we just saw, okay, oturum 5 saat sürdü is not possible, and oturum or 5 saat sürüldü is not possible. However, when we look at a construction like 7, araba sürüldü, now obviously, the phonetic construction is the same in both predicates. However, the fact that we have araba şoför tarafından sürüldü as a grammatical construction is in fact disambiguating between the two verbs. So that what is significant is that in 6, the entity is oturum, the only argument is oturum. However, in 7, the two underlyingly, the verb is not the same, because we can have the agentive phrase in the structure, and araba is the theme here, which has been moved to the subject position. So that the verbal ambiguity or the semantic ambiguity is in fact disambiguated, eliminated in terms of passivization in of the verbs, of the possible verbs. But what is more crucial with respect to both passivization is the relationship of the implicit arguments of the constructions and the animacy effects of the interpretation of the constructions. Now, when we look at the constructions, okay, the subject of an unergative verb is an agent, and agents are typically animate subjects. However, DPs referring to inanimate entities can also function as subjects of unergative predicates. Now, as we mentioned earlier, okay, Levin and Rapoport basically labeled such unergative verbs as theme unergatives. Based on the animacy and inanimacy of the predicates, we can distinguish between various types of predicate types, kind of semantic predicate types, and see the effect of the animacy of the arguments on their syntactic properties. Okay, now one class of predicates are sense predicates, where the claim here, or in the research that was carried out on which this presentation is based, is that there's a distinction between inherent versus inherited animacy. And that language is in fact sensitive to the semantic distinction between inherent versus inherited animacy, as opposed to, of course, inanimacy. Okay, manner unergatives show this distinction. Animacy and unaccusatives with respect to the unaccusative predicates. Okay, we will see how the directional unaccusatives and existential unaccusatives are in fact distinguished with respect to the degrees of animacy of the single arguments that they have. And then the psych verbs, I basically propose that there are two types of psych verbs in Turkish: experiencer object psych verbs and experiencer subject psych verbs. Okay, so to kind of start looking at the next one, sense predicates, please. Sense predicates, the next one. Yeah, okay, that one, thank you. All right. Now let's look at these sentences. Herkes soğukta üşüyordu, titriyordu. Fine. Masa soğukta üşüyordu, titriyordu is out. Okay. Now, herkes sıcakta terliyordu is okay. Araba sıcakta terliyordu is out. At least for me, I think. I don't know if anyone says this would be okay. But what do we see? All right. These are sense predicates. Okay. Üşümek, titremek. These require an animate entity, and neither masa nor araba are animate. And therefore, the B sentences in both of these examples are ungrammatical. Well, they're grammatical, but they're uninterpretable, showing that, there's a distinction between animate and inanimate arguments of these constructions, of these sense predicates. So if we look at the next examples, okay, next slide, body part arguments. Now, okay, the sentence, ince uzun parmakları, parmaklı elleri titriyordu. Ayaklarım üşüdü ve yüzüm terliyor. Okay, now what we have is not just the owner of these, but these are body parts of an animate entity. Now, as such, eller are not really animate. However, what they have, eller and ayaklar and yüz, what has happened here is that these are body parts of an animate entity, and therefore they have inherited animacy feature of the whole, which is an individual, a human being, or a living entity, and therefore a sentence such as ince uzun parmaklı elleri titriyordu is in fact licensed, it's interpretable, and the construction is fully grammatical, which is distinct from çocuk titriyordu veya soğukta adam titriyordu, which is where we have the whole as the entity, and a part of that whole can inherit or has inherited. It's an inherent property of the whole, and therefore it has inherited the animacy feature of the whole. So this is now inherent versus inherited animacy distinction, where inherited arguments or arguments with inherited animacy assume the properties of the whole, which in fact contrasts with when we look at the next slide, inherited animacy versus teleological capability. Let's now look at this construction. In 11, we have bardak terlemiş, which is where bardak is in fact inanimate. However, a sentence such as this is licensed in the situation where bardak is full of water or is placed in a position where it receives on its surface the effect of the environment, and therefore it has the kind of look of terlemek. But what has happened is that the real world situation licenses such a construction. However, when such a construction, on the other hand, we note that this is distinct from the inherited animacy of Yerler, because a sentence like 12 A is not possible. Bardak üşümüş or bardak titriyor is not possible. The structure is ungrammatical or semantically, in fact, uninterpretable. Titriyor maybe at this point it's going to be not a good thing, but only very externally, if there is some sort of tremor of the area, so that everything is trembling, but that's not inherently trembling. It is because the whole world is trembling at that point. But I'm not quite sure if we would ever get bardak üşüyor. Only if the construction is in the whole, in an environment where an inanimate entity can be conceived of carrying out that sense, as in, bardak terlemiş. So that what we are observing is the distinction between inherent animacy of the whole body, inherited of the part of the body, as opposed to inanimate entities, where inanimate entities are licensed with sense predicates only if a situation, an external situation, makes it possible for this construction to be interpretable. Okay. Now, what we also observe with respect to the inanimate entities and the distinction between inherited animacy, teleological capability, whatever, is that an inanimate entity cannot occur, yes, the next one, sorry. an inanimate entity cannot occur with some sort of a source adjunct. So, bardak sıcakta terlemiş is not possible. Ama elim sıcakta terlemiş is possible. Now, elim, with its inherited animacy, is licensed in such a construction with a source adjunct, but bardak terlemiş is not possible. So that we see with respect to the constructions, the degrees of animacy. Inherent, inherited, and inanimacy. Okay. Now, with respect to the inherent animacy and implicit subject in an impersonal passive construction. Okay, the interpretation of the implicit subject of an impersonal passive construction. What we notice is that the distinction between inherent and inherited animacy is in fact very clearly observed when we note the occurrence of the two categories of these constructions in an of these two types of arguments in an impersonal passive construction. Let's look at the example. İnce uzun parmaklı elleri soğukta titriyordu, which is fine. We have inherent animacy. Now we have an impersonal passive construction. Soğukta titreniyordu. Now the implicit argument of this construction cannot be interpreted as being eller. It can only be interpreted as beings that are inherently animate, not inheritedly animate, but inherently animate. So that in an impersonal passive construction, the implicit subject of a sense predicate can only be interpreted as an entity which has which inherently has the potential of sensing that sense of that sense predicate, or experiencing that sense predicate, what that sense predicate indicates. All right, so that what we are seeing is that the degrees of animacy, the various categories of animacy, are in fact are reflected in the various grammatical levels of the constructions in Turkish. All right, so inherent versus inherited animacy, okay, a subject of some other anergative verbs. One other example that we have. Now, what is also crucial is that a verb like ağrımak, for example, we have başım ağrıyor. Ben ağrıyorum is out, which is in fact indicating to us that the verb itself is selecting an argument that has an inherited animate feature, but not inherent animate feature. And likewise, this does not have an implicit passive construction. Ağrınıyor is out. Okay? Neither in the interp, it's just not possible. It's not potentially possible, which ties back with the initial examples that we had, where the only interpretation is with the inherently animate, the implicit subject being the inherently animate argument, but not inheritedly animate argument. Here, since ağrımak does not license an inherently animate argument, it also does not license passivization. The verb cannot passivize. Okay, now the next class of verbs, one place predicates. Manner anergatives, yeah, manner anergatives. Next slide, maybe. Yeah, manner adverbs, okay. Manner anergatives, sorry. All right, uç as a manner anergative. Okay, we have uçak uçuyor. So this is basically what within, you know, Farley and Harley's terminology would be called teleological capability. Uçak has the potential to fly. All right. Now, not only that, but what is also crucial is that a minus animate entity, okay, uçak is minus animate, however, it has the teleological capability. That's why they are made to fly. A car cannot fly, but uçak can. Under certain conditions, okay, it's also possible that an entity, an inanimate entity, which is not necessarily designed for flying, can also be the subject of the verb fly, as we get in 7. Okay. Elinin bir hareketiyle çakmağa kaymış, masadan aşağıya uçmuştu. So, uçan çakmak. All right. What flew in the air is çakmak, and çakmak, by definition, of course, is not designed for flying. Now, when we look at such constructions, manner anergatives, okay, manner anergatives in an impersonal passive construction, or what is crucial is that, first of all, these verbs do undergo passive, impersonal passive construction. We have Tokyo'ya uçuldu. However, the interpretation is not the inanimate entity, but the who flew is, in fact, is interpreted to be the individuals who flew to Tokyo. Now, what happens when we try to see if we can passivize the inanimate entity like çakmak, which has been kind of given the potential to fly because of dropping from hand. Elinin bir hareketiyle çakmağa kaymış, masadan aşağıya uçulmuştu is impossible. So that with a manner anergative, an implicit passive construction is not interpretable if the entity is minus animate. The structure is ungrammatical. So that what we are observing is, in fact, another constraint on a semantic constraint on the impersonal passive construction. Okay. So those were basically the anergatives. Let's now get to the unaccusatives. The animacy, the next one. Animacy. Yes, exactly. Animacy and unaccusatives. Okay, with respect to unaccusatives, as we said earlier, okay, there are two types of unaccusatives, directional and existentials. Both classes are typically associated with both plus animate DPs, but they also license minus animate DPs. And we'll see how unaccusatives behave with these two classes of animate entities. Okay, the next one. Yeah. So let's first focus on directional unaccusatives. Okay, directional unaccusatives typically select animate arguments. So herkes Mersin'e gelmeli, right? Yolcular Ankara'ya trenle gittiler. Directional unaccusatives also license animate, or rather minus animate, inanimate DPs as their argument. So we have a construction like tren Ankara'ya geldi ve otobüs Muğla'ya gitti. Of course, with respect to how these directional unaccusatives license inanimate entities, it's basically the teleological capability of the vehicles that these are made to kind of, change location, go from one place to another, so that the teleological capability of Foley and Harry account for these constructions. Now, if we go on and look at, the next slide, probably. Impersonal, directional unaccusatives, exactly. All right. So let's now look at how the directional unaccusatives behave with respect to the impersonal passive constructions. All right. A sentence like Ankara'ya gidildi veya işte Mersin'e gidildi veya Mersin'e gelindi veya Gar'a gelindi. Okay. The predicates themselves, of course, can undergo impersonal passives. However, the interpretation is only the interpretation of the implicit argument in these constructions is only as the animate argument and not the inanimate argument. In Ankara'ya gidildi, the interpretation is that it's the people who were on their way on the bus went to Ankara. And likewise, Gar'a gelindi, it's not the train that came, but the people who are the travelers came to the station. So that the impersonal passive construction is licensed with the implicit argument receiving only plus animate interpretation. Okay, let's now continue with these. All right. What is also significant is that, okay, the same predicate can, in fact, the same predicate was gelmek, for example, can occur with the subject sıra in 23. Ardından gene genç kızlara geliyordu sıra, which is grammatical, and the subject of gelmek here is interpreted to be sıra. However, when we look at 24b, ardından gene genç kızlara geliniyordu is out. So the implicit argument of a directed, the theme argument can only be for something that is teleologically has the capability of, in fact, changing location or changing certain position in the setting. Sıra cannot do that, and therefore B is not a licensed construction. So again, what we observe is the semantic properties of the arguments having an effect on the interpretation or even licensing the an impersonal passive construction and the interpretation of the implicit subject. Okay, if we go to the next slide, again, encyclopedic knowledge. All right. Likewise, okay, when we look at a structure like öyle geçer yaşam, where yaşam is, in fact, is functioning as the subject of geçmek. However, it is not possible to have the subject or the implicit subject of an impersonal passive construction to be interpreted as being yaşam. So öyle geçilir cannot be the passive construction of 25A. It can only be if we are talking about actually passing, either a vehicle passing another vehicle or one person passing another person, so that either teleologically has the capability or inherently has the capability of changing direction, but not yaşam, which is not inherently, and it's also not teleologically animate in that sense. All right. Now, directional unaccusatives they distinguish between teleologically inanimate, teleologically capable, and inherently animate entities. Let's look at now existential unaccusatives. All right. Yeah, the next slide, please. All right, we have a verb like belirdi. Birden erkekler parkı önümüzde belirdi. All right, which is it's an inanimate. Okay, beliren erkekler parkı. And then we have yürüdüğümüz sokak gittikçe daralıyordu. So daralmak. Sokak is getting narrower. Again, minus animate with the existential unaccusatives. Trying to form an impersonal passive construction with inanimate arguments. Birden önümüzde belirildi is not possible. There's no way in which that sentence can be interpreted as the implicit subject being erkekler parkı. And likewise, gittikçe daralınıyordu. Again, that is not a possible construction with the implicit subject being sokak. If the structure is at all possible, for some speakers it is possible, it's usually interpreted more or less as a sense predicate, where we can have, içim daralıyor, and then which is like inherited animacy. So daralınıyordu. O durumda o kadar sıkıcıydı ki daralınıyordu. That might be a possible structure. And belirildi, again, can have either an inherently or, only as inherently animate interpretation. If the structure is at all possible. Okay, next slide. Animacy and existential unaccusatives. Another predicate with as an existential unaccusative. Let's look at kaybolmuş, kaybolmak. Herkes o akşam karanlık yollarda kaybolmuştu. O akşam karanlık yollarda kaybolunmuştu. The implicit subject being plus animate. All right. Now, güneş yeniden bulutların kalın örtüsü ardında kaybolmuştu. Impersonal passive construction. yeniden bulutların kalın örtüsü ardında kaybolunmuştu. The argument, missing argument, cannot be interpreted to be güneş. If it is at all possible, the only interpretation can be, if it is feasible at all, the inherently animate entity is the one that was lost. So the unavailability of the attentive reading with the implicit argument of kaybolmak being interpreted as güneş is evidence that the single argument of the unaccusative predicate has to be plus animate of an IPC, of an impersonal passive construction. Okay, so we have basically looked at manner adverbs, we have looked at sense predicates, and now let's look at the animacy of arguments and psych verbs. All right. And the claim basically here is that there are two categories of psych verbs in Turkish, which I refer to as the experiencer subject psych verbs and experiencer object psych verbs, which for Chomsky are fear class and please class. All right, so çocuk köpekten korktu, unergative. Okay, experiencer subject. Bu sözleriniz bizi çok üzdü. Unaccusative, experiencer object, basically. So that Turkish is in fact distinguishing between two categories of psych verbs. All right, if we can go to the next slide. Experiencer object psych verbs. All right. Now, some of the verbs are üzmek, like sıkmak ve kızmak. Okay, kırmak rather. All right, we can have a construction like bu sözleriniz bizi çok üzdü, or bu sözleriniz bizi çok kırdı, pardon, or bu olay bizi çok sıktı. What is crucial is that the experiencer object verbs license constructions in which the possessor of the theme argument is the subject. So in such cases, the theme argument can be expressed as the complement of a postpositional phrase. Okay, let's look at 32. Siz bu sözlerinizle bizi çok üzdünüz. So siz is in fact the possessor of the theme sözler. And it occurs as the subject. We've got the subject-verb agreement. And what happens is that the theme argument is in fact occurring as the complement of the postpositional phrase ile. And likewise, onlar bu olayla bizi çok sıktı. All right, that's an event or an happening that they caused. So they are in fact the possessor of olay, and onlar is functioning as the subject of the psych verb sıkmak, and olay is occurring as the complement of the postposition ile. Okay, so now if we go to the next slide and look at passive and experiencer object unaccusative predicates. All right, we have, okay, as the passive construction. Biz bu sözlerinize çok üzüldük. And biz bu olaya çok sıkıldık. So in these constructions, okay, basically show us that we basically have biz in both of these constructions as the subject of the passive construction. Okay, the experiencer object is merged inside the VP of the verb üs, and it checks for case in spec little VP, The experiencer object therefore raises to spec TP to check for case. Since if there is no passive, of course, it remains inside the little VP and it checks for its case. Bu olay bizi çok üzdü. However, in those cases when passive applies, biz raises to spec TP to check for case. The oblique argument which remains in C2 is marked dative. So the oblique argument in such constructions cannot occur in the tarafından phrase, which is the canonical agentive phrase in a Turkish passive construction, but its possessor can, indicating that 32AB are canonical transitive constructions, actually. So if we look at the next one, next slide, yeah. Experiencer object psych verbs. So bu sözler bizi çok kırdı. Okay, siz bu sözlerinizle bizi çok, oh, this is the same again. Sorry. Bu olay bizi çok sıktı. Onlar bu olayla bizi çok sıktı. I meant the other one, I think. Oops. Sorry. Yeah. As evidence for little VP. Exactly. Now I'm on the right one. I made a mistake myself. Okay, sorry. All right. So basically the experiencer object psych verbs do license this passive construction. Biz sizin tarafınızdan is fine. But bu sözleriniz tarafından is of course not fine. Biz sizin tarafınızdan çok üzüldük. That's, I mean, sizin tarafınızdan is slightly fine, I suppose. And biz bu olay tarafından çok sıkıldık is definitely not grammatical. Okay, so that I basically argue that these are, in fact, this shows us evidence that there is a little VP and that biz is in fact base generated inside the little VP. And if there's no passive, of course, it remains inside passive. And bu olay bizi çok sıktı is the output of the construction. Okay. Now, the next one. Causatives, experiencer object structures as causatives. Okay, experiencer object predicates do not have causative counterparts. Bu sözleriniz bizi çok üzdürdü is out. Bu olay bizi çok sıktırdı is out. Psych predicates, these psych predicates marked with cause morpheme is predicted to be ungrammatical because there's no external argument of an experiencer object verb which can function as the theme of dir. Okay, and as the last category of verbs with the animacy features, okay, let's look at the experiencer subject verbs like korkmak and sevinmek. Yeah, the next slide, please. So we have çocuk köpekten korktu ve biz bu işe şaştık. The theme argument in an experiencer subject verb construction is inherently case marked with dative or ablative. Right? The theme argument is marked with dative and ablative. All right. And I basically argue that these are typically transitive constructions with the experiencer subject generated in spec little vp, and the object basically marks the or bears the accusative case marker. The embedded little vp checks accusative, and the predicate embedded under cause checks dative case. Otherwise, it checks accusative, as in the following examples. Çocuk köpekten korktu, köpek çocuğu korkuttu. Biz bu işe şaştık, bu iş bizi şaşırttı ve ben ona çok kızdım. Okay, o beni çok kızdırdı. Okay, if we go to the next slide. Experiencer subject psych predicates as transitive constructions. Next slide. Okay, exactly. All right. The implicit subject of the psych verb marked with the aorist is interpreted non-referentially, while that of a psych verb marked with past marker is interpreted referentially. All right. So Nakiboğlu Demiralp's analysis of tense aspect marker, making a distinction between the interpretation of the argument of the psych verb is, in fact, it holds in such constructions. Maybe we will go back to it if there's a question on that. Okay, and as the last piece of evidence for the distinction between the experiencer subject and experiencer object verbs is the subject of kork. In a participle construction, we have köpekten korkan çocuk. Okay, korkan is the subject participle construction, so that the çocuk, which it modifies, is the subject of kork. Ve bu işe şaşan insanlar, again, insanlar bu işe şaştı. So insanlar is, in fact, in the subject position of şaşmak, and relativization is realized with the participle, subject participle. So that the experiencer subject psych verbs are, in fact, distinct from experiencer object verbs, experiencer object psych verbs. So that Turkish is making a distinction between these two types. And basically, I think this is where I should stop. I have been speaking without stop for more than an hour. So Turkish, I hope I have tried to argue now as well that Turkish distinguishes between three types of animacy: inherent animacy, which has been claimed in the literature; teleological animacy, as argued in the literature. But in addition to these two categories, there's also inherited animacy, which is in fact grammaticalized, because it makes a distinction between whether we can, whether Turkish licenses an impersonal passive construction or not, or the interpretation of the implicit argument of an impersonal passive construction is what I should say, actually. Okay, the difference between, okay, that there's a difference between the three types of animacy, and this difference is grammaticalized, and also the analysis of psychological predicates in Turkish. Okay, that Turkish distinguishes between two types of predicates, psychological predicates. And so therefore, I thank you for your patience, and I apologize for the long period it took us to start, and just, very brief set of references, very brief. There's, of course, a long list of references. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask, or any comments you would like to make. I don't know if this made sense. Okay, Sibel wants to say something, I think.
İyi akşamlar.
İyi akşamlar.
Hocam Türkçe sorabilir miyim? Emeğinize sağlık bu arada.
Tabii yani ben İngilizce yani İngilizce de verebilirsin dediler. Oradan İngilizce şey yaptım. Bilemiyorum. Pardon.
Çok teşekkürler hocam. Çok aydınlatıcı bir sunumdu gerçekten. Ben tez konum psychological verbs benim.
Güzel.
Ama kendi hızında okuma deneyi, deneysel bir çalışma. Öncelikle bununla ilgili bir böyle gözlemim oldu. Hani çok sorudan ziyade gözlemsel bir şeyden bahsetmek istiyorum.
Buyurun, güzel.
Experiencer object verbs için söyleyeceğim. Şimdi biraz ben şimdi processing çalışacağım için optimized theory bazlı çalışıyorum hani şu anda.
Evet.
Bu açıdan baktığımda şunu fark ettim. Experiencer object olduğu zaman en çok dative formu uygunken experiencer subject olduğunda size anlatırken de bunu net gördüm. Datif, ablatif ya da akuzatif sanırım o da oluyor. Bu hiyerarşik bir düzenlemeyi de gösteriyor aslında. Bize aslında bir de işlemleme hızı arasındaki fark için bu hiyerarşik düzenin ya da hiyerarşik sıralanışın ya da bu kısıtlamaların önemi olacaktır diye düşünüyorum. Siz ne düşünüyorsunuz bu konuda?
Evet, yani ona açıkçası bu experiencer subject, experiencer object sınıfları arasında gerçekten processing farkı var mı? O çok ilginç sonuçlar verecektir ve önemli sonuçlar verecektir. Çünkü yani yapısal bir farklılık olduğu burada işte öne sürülüyor. Ondan sonra onun gerçek anlamda şeyi var mı? Yansıması prosese. Onu görmek evet iyi olacak. Tabii case markerlar açısından şey var, fakat her ikisi de case markerları aldığı için aynı tür case markerlar aldığı için bence o experiencer subject, experiencer object sınıflarını da daha belirgin olarak ortaya çıkaracaktır bulgularınız.
Tamam hocam, çok teşekkür ederim.
Dikkatli yapmanız lazım yalnız.
Evet hocam.
Evet.
Özgür hocamla birlikte zaten tez çalışmamız devam ediyor.
Çok...
Bir şey daha ilgimi çekti hocam. Bu animesi ile ilgili olarak da böyle iki örnek aklıma geldi. Siz bardak örneğini verdikten sonra. Impersonal olarak hani bardak buğulanmış diyebiliyoruz Türkçede. Fakat hani body parts açısından baktığımızda ellerin buğulanmış diyemiyoruz mesela. Hani burada da çok ilginç bir yapı var. Burada hatta canlılıkla ilgili bir hiyerarşi yine söz konusu gibi. Örneğin yapraklar dökülüyor diyebiliyorken biz hani yine canlılık açısından evet artı insan değil ama sonuçta canlı bir şeyden bahsediyoruz yapraklar derken. Ama ellerim dökülüyor diyemiyoruz ya da Ayşe dökülüyor diyemiyoruz. Hani bu da ilginç. Dikkatinizi belki çekmiştir ama hani benim böyle dikkatimi çekti.
Evet, yani o onu söylemeye yani bir örnek var. Yani mesela verbler eylemler öğelerini seçiyorlar tabii. Yani ağrımak mesela o sizin söylediğinize bir noktada paralel bir şekilde. Yani ben ağrıyorum diyemiyoruz.
Evet.
Ama başım ağrıyor veya işte kolum ağrıyor, elim ağrıyor, işte karnım ağrıyor diye bir şekilde onu kısıtlamak zorundayız ki inherent yani inherent değil animacy, oradaki inherited benim analizimde. O açıdan evet, yani dökmek dediğimiz zaman tabii her bir eylemin kendi getirdiği küçük semantik şeyler var, özellikler var. Genellikle yani bir whole entity dökülmüyor. Yani ne diyeyim, ben çocuğu döktüm diyemiyoruz. Ama işte parça parça olabilecek bir şey dökülüyor. O açıdan işte yaprak, ağaç yapraklarını döktü diyoruz. Ama o sırada da tabii ağaç ne kadar agent. Ağaç agent değil aslında. Yani öyle gibi duruyor ama ağaç gerçek anlamda agent değil. O açıdan yani o semantik anlamsal özelliklere gerçekten çok ayrıntılı bakmak gerekiyor. Yani gözlemleriniz iyi. Evet, şey buğulandı. Gene buğulanmak mesela yani ben buğulandım diyemiyoruz. Demek ki buğulanmak aslında bir transparan olan bir şeyin bir işte insan veyahut da insan parçası, el olsun, yüz olsun. Yani gözlerin buğulandı dediğimiz zaman onda bile biraz farklı oluyor gerçek anlamdaki buğulanmadan.
Evet.
Orada bir saydamlık, yani bakın gözlerin buğulandı diyebiliyoruz ama ağzın buğulandı diyemiyoruz.
Evet.
Nerede şeyde bir saydamlık gerekiyor demek ki buğulanma eyleminde. Yani o argümanlarını, öğelerini seçerken ki anlamsal özellikler çok daha ayrıntıya giriyor her bir eylemin kendi içinde.
Evet hocam.
Ama işte birden fazla şeyin kendine baktığımız zaman orada işte inherited yani içselleşmiş, içselleştirilmiş veyahut da kazanılmış, inherited bir noktada kazanılmış şey. Çünkü yani Allah korusun ama yani parmak şey yaptığı zaman artık hiçbir şey hissetmiyor. Ama hala şeyken sahibinin üstündeyken o zaman üşüyebiliyor parmaklar.
Evet, evet hocam. Güzel gözlemler. Emeğinize sağlık hocam. Çok teşekkürler.
Rica ederim. Kolay gelsin. İyi çalışmalar.
Teşekkür ederim hocam. Sağ olun.
Evet. Başka acaba? Evet. Peki örneklerden aynı fikirde olmadıklarınız var mıydı? Ben sorayım size bari. Ya Emrah, bir soru mu veya bir şey mi söyleyeceksiniz?
Okay, can we say that this animacy, we see animacy mostly with anergative predicates when we compare them with ergative and unaccusative?
You mean,
like I took notes like anergative verbs or predicates like koşmak, terlemek, gelmek, gitmek, korkmak.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, unergatives actually, you know, they're the subject verbs, and subjects are taken to be inherently agentive.
Yeah.
Okay. Except, of course, there are certain unergatives which license also not really animate in the sense of, you know, animacy, semantic animacy that we take it, but somehow they either inherit or theologically, like what işte uçak uçuyor type of construction. All right. So those, I mean, yeah, that's, I mean, inherently animate. They have to be animate because they're agents. For agency, the first category is semantic property is animacy, of course. An agent has to be animate in order to will. An agent is an entity that can will and that has the capacity to carry out the action of the predicate. Okay.
Yeah.
So then, you know, what happens in those constructions where those entities that are not, quote unquote, inherently animate are also licensed in unergative constructions.
Okay.
Like buz eridi type of construction.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Buz eridi, did you say it is an ergative predicate? Not
That-
anergative, but ergative.
That's actually, kind of.
Debatable?
Yeah,
It's-
it's one of the
Okay.
debatable ones. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I was looking for a syntactic difference between ergatives and anaccusatives. Like in a sentence like buz eridi, if erimek is ergative,
Mhm.
right? We cannot say buz erinde. So no
Exactly.
impersonal passive. Adam öldü, anaccusative, but we don't say adam ölündü. So impersonal passive construction is not a good syntactic test for that, diagnostic. Do we have another one? I know I should know the answer to this question, but it's been some time, so I wanted to ask you. So is there a syntactic test to make a distinction between ergatives and anaccusatives?
Well, yeah, kind of, the causative constructions.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, causative. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Oh, can I ask something else?
yeah, please feel free
Okay.
to.
So bu bardak terlemiş.
Evet.
Okay, so terlemek is a bodily function, right? Okay,
Right.
like, so what is the semantics of that? I was wondering. Because you tried to, I mean, you kind of like went to great lengths to justify that. That's what I'm asking.
Okay. Well, you're basically asking me to describe the physical conditions under which bardak can terlemek. Okay, I think, for example, if it's got some water in it, and you apply some heat to it, so that the water starts evaporating, but then it's not completely filled with water. So when the water is evaporating, it gets to the top and it starts forming bubbles, kind of, on the glass.
So it's almost boiling then. Okay.
Almost. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bardak terlemiş. Okay. Thank you. Adam terlemiş, bardak terlemiş. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Terlemek is, where you actually have some sort of
sweaty.
Liquid. So it's like,
Liquid,
the bardak has water at the bottom, but a little bit of water, and then
I see.
evaporating, it gets condensed on top.
Yeah. I see. So the glass is literally sweating buckets.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I mean, some of the examples, actually, as you noticed, I'm sure they came from the literature, okay? So that the distinction between the types of animacy was very clear, okay? Very clear. It's not, things that I simply, wrote in order to argue for it, but that the distinction is very, very prominently observed.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for your patience, for everyone. You have stuck through it. Thank you. And as I said, I apologize for the problems initially, but and I still don't know why my computer did not allow this. And I'm sure I will never find out why it never allowed it. Okay. Because with Zoom, I had no problems. Okay, I held classes for 2 years, and
it's the browser probably, not your computer. The laptop is fine. Yeah, but the issue with the browser. Yeah.
You mean my
Chrome? Google Chrome. Yeah, Google Chrome. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all is well that ends well. Let's say.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and all is well that ends well. Yeah, thank you, Filiz. I think she just said thank you. Well, I thank you all for being patient and for inviting me for this talk. I hope you found it interesting. I hope that some questions came to your mind as a result of this talk this afternoon or this evening. And if anyone wants to write to me, you've got my email, and I am reachable. Okay, so please feel free to write and give me your feedback, or ask questions or ask anything, whatever that has to do with linguistics, and I'd be very happy to get back to you. Okay.
Çok teşekkür ederiz hocam. Öncelikle sabrınız ve bu güzel çalışmanız için biz çok keyif aldık dinlerken. Emeğiniz için ayrı teşekkür ediyoruz. Tüm katılımcılarımıza da teşekkür ediyoruz. Gerçekten güzel bir etkinlikti. O zaman başka bir soru yoksa iyi akşamlar dileyip sunumumuzu sonlandırabiliriz.
Tamam, iyi akşamlar. Çok teşekkürler.
Teşekkür ederim hocam.
İyi akşamlar herkese.
İyi akşamlar.